But a worldwide push for cleaner energy is putting pressure on Australia's reliance on coal. Now we're looking to global success stories like Germany, which has shut down black coal mining and is about to do the same with brown coal. What does a region like this do when it starts to think about getting out of coal?
We're talking about 1.5 million workers who were directly dependent on the coal industry. And so the idea is that we need some kind of managed way of a transition from coal to post-coal.
It's called just transition, a shift from fossil-based energy to renewable energy while protecting workers and the economy.
The first thing that was done is that the privately owned mines were put together into one company, and then over a period of 50 years you had a very slow phasing out.
Over 50 years?
At the time there wasn't really the urgency. If we accept climate change and if we accept that we need to act relatively quickly to counter climate change, then this is a line of work that has no future.
Just over a year ago, Germany's last black coal mine closed. Not a single member was sacked during the phasing out of the once 600,000 strong workforce. RWE is one of Germany's largest utility companies and still operates brown coal or open-cut lignite mines. But a government recommendation says those plants should close by 2038 in favour of renewables.
By 2030, we're going to have reduced our CO2 footprint by 70%. We're focusing on offshore and onshore wind farms and in PV projects all over the world.
This is a pretty extraordinary view. You can see the coal mine down below. Above it you can see the power stations, one of which has already stopped functioning. And then watching over this scene, you can see the wind turbines. And the amazing thing about that is that those wind turbines are owned by the same company that runs the mine. It kind of captures in one image the transition that Germany's going through. And you can't help but be impressed by the way that they're going about it. They know there will be challenges. They know that it has to happen, and they know that with cooperation and a determination to make sure that the workers themselves are not the people who suffer and pay the price for this, that this can be achieved. They have some natural advantages in doing it over us in Australia, but really, the main thing that gets in the way of us achieving something similar is just political culture.
History of labour adjustment in Australia is dreadful. Workers get thrown on the scrap heap. Inevitably, a third never work again, a third get shitty jobs, and a third get decent jobs. That's what always happens. And the politicians throw a few $1 million on the table, and you know what that gets used for? Consultants providing training about how to write your resume.
Germany's secret weapon seems to be a high level of cooperation between unions and businesses. So is Australian industrial relations too combative? Are unions too aggressive towards businesses and the reverse?
It's the survival of the fittest under our industrial laws. We need government authorities to step in and force some cooperation.
I think what you need is a government that is prepared to be more interventionist. Given that also through taxation, Germans had to contribute to funding this long transition period, there was relatively high acceptance.
Have you been to Australia?
Yes, several times.
Do you see any of those things present there?
The big question, I guess, is whether there is a majority amongst the Australian voters for that kind of proposal.
But even the unions admit Australia's domestic coal-fired sector is struggling. Tony Marr says that's the best place to start for any type of just transition.
The coal-fired power sector is already in decline. 10 power stations have closed in the last decade.
Is there a way in Australia to talk about just transition without your members getting nervous and upset about it?
If you go out to central Queensland and start talking just transition, you're wasting your time. They see the industry actually growing. But if you talk to people in the coal-fired power sector, much more up for that discussion. And that's where I think we need to start.
So interesting.
Yeah. Germany's always cited as the gold standard on this sort of stuff. And they have some advantages we don't. One of the big things they have is that their coal companies, it's really interesting the way they're run. So let's say there's like 11 places on the board. Yeah. 5 of them would be business people, 5 of them are from the union, and then there's a casting vote. So that means that the union has to think about it commercially, And the business has to think about the workers because the union's represented on the board, and that means they get this cooperation that's really fascinating. But the big piece of it is that we don't talk about transit. Like, we think shut down coal, and there's no way of
then
having...
you can see why communities get up in arms.
Well, I would.
Say, yes,
I would get
of course.
really ropeable if that's all I was hearing. But if the conversation from the very beginning was, here are X number of 100,000 or X tens of thousands of jobs we're going to create here, and for those who don't have jobs, we're going to give you enough money that you don't have to work again, which is what's happened.
It's a different
in Germany.
conversation.
It's a totally different conversation. We don't have it. Anyway.